This is episode number 2 in a video series called How to Collect Wine Without Going Crazy. In the series, we're looking at which wines you should be buying. Not only the wines you particularly like and want to drink, but those that virtually everybody could enjoy, plus the wines you should lay down or collect. In the series, we cover topics like determining your financial sweet spot, your financial capabilities, accessibility or layering your wine, 6 tips for putting it all together, and much more. Whether you're shooting for 48 bottles or 4,800, in this episode we're going to look at 4 common approaches to collecting wine. The 4th approach is the one I personally use. Plus, there'll be a really good bonus at the end. By the way, if at any time you like what you hear, click like and consider subscribing. The subscription is free. And also, hit the little bell so you'll be notified when there's a new post. And consider sharing this with your friends. I'm sure they would enjoy it. Now remember, there's no one-size-fits-all in creating and organizing your collection, but without a plan, you can really go crazy. Each of the 4 approaches that we'll be looking at are merely guidelines for you to create a wonderful collection of wine. The first approach is called the investment approach. Here you focus as much on the wine market as you do on your own personal taste. A very small percentage of wine produced globally ever increases in value. To resell it successfully, you have to meticulously document its history, including storage both before and after you purchased it. You have to make sure that you're purchasing wines in perfect condition and that they're highly regarded vintages. Your wine hobby now becomes a cottage business. Very few people have both the finances or the temperament for this. In theory, it seems simple enough. You buy highly regarded and classic wines, hold them until they approach maturity, somewhere between 5 and 20 years or longer, then you go turn around and sell them at an auction. Now the second approach we might call the instant gratification approach. Here you're buying wines that are at their very peak of drinkability. Again, 95% of all wines are produced to drink within 2 to 5 years. Now with this second approach, we're talking about those 5% of wines that are produced to be drunk either when they're released, like right now, or 10, 15, 20, or 30 years from their vintage date. Now, that may not sound like instant gratification to you, but the way this works is you're not buying the wines to lay it down for all those years. You're buying old, mature wines to drink sooner than later. These are the type of wines known for their ability to improve with age, as well as excellent vintages that are now at or near their peak. My favorite wine, Chateauneuf de Pape, drinks really well when it's young and evolves over time. It hits its stride in 10 to 20 years from the vintage date, and that's the date that's marked on the bottle. With the Chateauneufs, as an example, you go ahead and buy a number of 10-year-old and plan on drinking it now or in several months. Some retailers offer mature wines and they're occasionally available direct from wineries, but the primary source for these wines is at auction. Expect to spend $100 or more per bottle. Now some people use this approach because they like mature wines and have limited storage space. Others just want to skip the whole wine aging process in favor of classic vintages that are already mature. This approach is also for those who are looking for younger, high status, hard to come by selections that may be ready to drink but are difficult to find. So in all honesty, approach number 2 is a collection of sorts. It's a wide array of phenomenal and classic wines that generally you plan to drink within a year. It's really more like a big pantry of just absolutely wonderful, phenomenal wines. Let me ask you, has this information been helpful? If it is, please let me know or just write Asti in the comments below. Now the third approach to collecting wine is the tasting approach. This is when you select and collect wines that deepen your knowledge of what you love and you believe will expand your horizons. Generally, those using this approach buy a few bottles at a time because their objective is to experience, taste, and learn more about more and more different wines. Now, my suggestion is that if you take this approach, you don't buy any less than 3 bottles of wine. And that's 3 bottles of each wine. There are several reasons for this. The most obvious reasons are, number one, if you try a wine and you really like it, you want to have a couple of additional bottles on hand for the future. Also, if you buy one bottle and it's flawed or corked, you want to have more on hand. And number 3, try one bottle today, have another in 6 months or a year, and then have another in a year or 2. You know, people that do this usually take notes of what they're tasting or have these incredible memories of what they're tasting, and they compare how the wine has evolved over time between tastings. One of the beauties behind this approach is that if you have friends that are also into wine, you have a wide variety of wines to taste and explore, and you can have 10 or 12 people over to taste with you. Now, keep in mind, that's assuming that you serve a 2-ounce pour per person. All right, are you ready to take a look at the 4th approach, the balanced approach? Here you'll have wines to suit any occasion. This should include whites and reds, young and mature, plus everyday and prestige bottlings. These wines can mostly be sourced from good retailers or direct from the wineries. You might want to check out my video, How to Collect Wine Without Going Crazy, part number 3, or episode number 3. There, I go into more detail about how to balance the flavors and the style of your wine. The balanced approach is a great way for those new to collecting wine to get started. Most people that use this approach have a range of different price points and shelf lives in their collection, spanning wine regions, styles, and vintages. The goal of this is to assemble a foundation for a lasting collection so that you'll have an even mix of wines that are ready to drink plus wines with extended shelf lives. With this approach, you can also explore diverse wines. You can begin your collection with as many bottles as you want, but I would suggest somewhere around 10 cases. I'll show you how that works, or how I figured that, in the bonus at the end of the video. Now remember, as you get into this, you want to make sure that you have enough space to expand, but don't go crazy. Once you get this figured out, the only limit is your budget. Well, there you have it, the 4 approaches to collecting wine. But hang in there for the quick bonus at the end, where we'll look at how many bottles you want to get started with. But first, thanks so much for investing the time to watch this video. If you got something out of it, let me know in the comments below. Also, consider subscribing and hit the little bell to be notified when I post new videos. Oh, and also, share this video if it was helpful to you. I'd really appreciate it. All right, are you ready for the quick bonus? How many bottles you may need? Now, a good rule of thumb to determine how many bottles you need is you want to start off with approximately 6 months to a year's worth of wines. Now, you don't have to buy those all at one time, but think in that particular direction. So if you drink 5 bottles of wine per week, your collection should start somewhere between 120 and 200 bottles, or 10 to 20 cases. Now, I realize you may not drink 5 bottles every week. Actually, some weeks you'll drink less and some you'll drink more, particularly if you have friends over during the various seasonal holidays. Here, let me show you how this works. 5 bottles times 26 weeks, or 6 months, equals 130 bottles. 130 bottles divided by 12 bottles per case equals just over 10 cases. Additionally, 5 bottles times 52 weeks, or 1 year, equals 260 bottles, or about 22 cases. So figure out how many bottles you need for an average week, then just do the math. Well, there you have it. Thanks again for joining me. Make sure you watch the other videos, the other important videos that I talked about. Oh yeah, and remember to hit like and consider subscribing if you got something out of this video. Until next time, cheers.